I used to date someone whose bedspread was a king-size comforter that looked like the Texas flag, okay? This is not fiction. It's real life, and I am owed emotional damages.
Hello and welcome to Can't Let It Go, the show about the things stuck in our heads. My name is Matt and I use he, him pronouns.
I'm AC. I use they, them pronouns.
And today we are finally going to talk about Barbie.
The Barbie movie.
Which I believe that AC and I both watched today again.
I did. Yes, I watched it just a few hours ago.
But first, AC, tell me about this nugget you've got for me today.
Okay, so, last week we did this whole, last time we did this whole episode about, free-to-play games, and I talked about how I don't really spend money on games, and then pretty much immediately, like within 2 days, the game Gubbins, I'm going to say finally, a cell phone game, I'm so fucking old. An app-based game. Fuck.
A mobile game.
God damn it. A mobile game that's like a word game. I heard about it because Hank Green is paying.
He invested into the company to get 10%. Yeah. I say he invested to donate 10% of their revenue to partners
their revenue
in health. He and John don't really do profit.
Yeah. Anyway, I started playing it and almost immediately purchased the $5 version, which is like unlimited plays of their classic and pencil style of the game. There is other paywalled stuff like aesthetic stuff and skins and things like that I have not explored at all. I'm not interested in that. But as I said in the episode, I will pay $5 to be able to play this game as much as I want.
Right. You basically did the pay up front thing, right? Like game you can play for free, but it's like once a day. But yeah, it's a really cool little game. I've played a little bit of it. I don't know that I enjoy it as much as I enjoy other games in that style, but it is. I mean, the art direction in that game is absolutely incredible as well.
I dig the art, really dig the art. And then I just love word games. And I like that there's no like levels or anything like that it's just kind of the same game over and over again. You're only ever playing it against your own high score. I am have been falling just short, like 200 points short of my high score over and over again for the last few days. And I'm like, curse you. But I like it because it's like skill and luck. It's fun. Check it out if you like word games on your phone.
Yeah. I'll say the name is Gubbins. You can like get bad and good Gubbins in the game that kind of modify the board state a little bit. It's a fun little thing. I have a nugget, and it's mostly because I think that there is probably a full podcast episode that I could do on this thing, but I don't need to do that because I've been listening to a podcast about it, and that's how I got into it. Are you aware, if I say the name Gita Jackson, do you know who I'm talking about?
No.
They're a writer. Often when there's like a new Twitter clone that pops up, they're like the first person that is the person I see all over my feed. XOXO Gossip Gita.
XOXO Gossip Gita. I do know that. Okay, yes, I do know who they are. Yeah.
I know them originally from games writing.
Got it. Yeah.
And they wrote this really great piece about Spider-Man Miles Morales and basically that video game effectively being propaganda, which seems to have influenced Spider-Man 2 in a really cool way. Anyway, they and some other folks that they've worked with in the past started up a new games. I don't know if it's a critique or news site exclusively. It does both of those, but it's basically just a site for games writing, much like a lot of other journalists have done in the last few years, starting up their own place to get away from like the hellscape of being a journalist in the sort of ad-based market.
Yeah.
And the site's called Aftermath, and they have this podcast called 52 Pickup.
Okay.
Which is a read-through of the DC comic series 52, which is not New 52. is the original 52, which was a weekly series of books that took place after the Infinite Crisis series in DC, which was like a board reset basically, and the immediate follow-up to that, which was 1 year later, which they just started releasing after Infinite Crisis came out. And 52 was meant to fill the gap. And I don't know, you listen to them talk about it. They do a much better job talking, like even explaining what it is than I am. But it's basically a way for DC to show some of its less popular heroes to people. But there's people in there that like you might know their names now because they were in 52. If you know the name Booster Gold,
yes,
you probably know him from like the Justice League. I believe it was Unlimited cartoon.
I think that's right. Yeah,
he was featured in. Yeah,
those are like my favorite Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. I stand.
Great shows. He kind of came to prominence because of the series. Gita's idea is that the reason that The Rock wanted to play Black Adam is because of 52, because Black Adam was like kind of unpopular and not many people knew who he was before that. But he's a prominent character in 52. I say I've been reading it. They did an episode 0. I started reading before episode 1 and I finished it before episode 2. It's an every other week thing where they go through a single issue. So I've got 2 years.
Hell yeah.
Of a podcast to listen to everything I just finished reading.
Hey, that's perfect.
Yeah. But Alex Jaffe, the other host, who also does insert credit, has been really active on Blue Sky, basically being like, hey, ask me like what kind of stuff you want to read in DC Comics. I'll recommend you something. So one, I told him I wanted to read some Bat Family stuff, and he recommended me Wayne Family Adventures, which is a webtoon.
Interesting.
And that was so adorable.
Yeah.
I loved it. And like now it's a thing that I'm reading weekly when it comes out.
Fun.
Also, when I told him, I was like, hey, are you only releasing an episode every 2 weeks? Because I might be finished soon. He was like, oh, hell yeah. Just tell me what else you want. I got more. So I told him a character that I was interested in 52, and he recommended me more books that she was in. So.
Amazing.
Yeah, so you should go listen to 52 Pickup if that sounds interesting.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Well, let's get into Barbie.
Wow. Let's.
The long-awaited episode about Barbie.
The long-awaited by AC and Matt.
I will say that today I was taking my own notes, and I went to peek at yours because I created like a page within a page in our documents. And you highlighted in the movie almost the exact set of things that I did. And the whole time I'm thinking like, man, I really am focusing on some like bullshit that like doesn't really matter. And I was like, oh no, AC also was focusing on the same bullshit.
The same bullshit. You know what? That is the most classic us thing.
So the reason that we're doing this is because you said on the internet, Greta Gerwig made this movie for you.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that was my immediate take. Like, I finished watching the movie, and I was like, wow, this movie was made exactly for me. Like, it contained references to many, many things that I personally only find funny. Like, or I assume I only find funny. I guess maybe many other people also find it funny because it was in a movie, you know? Right. But like exactly my sense of humor, exactly my references, exactly my taste. And like maybe not exactly my politics or exactly like my the way that I approach culture and nuance, but in many ways checked all of the boxes for me. So I mean, if the question is how did I experience it on watching it again, right, compared to that experience, I still think all of that is true. I do think it lost a little bit of the like magic for me of seeing it in theaters and like having that first movie watching experience. I wasn't as enamored as I was with like just the joy of the experience the first go around. I found it easier to like sit in my critiques than to like sit in the fun of it. And I think I even wrote in a note at one point like, oh my God. When I start to like really dig deep into trying to like analyze this movie, the number one thing that I do to myself is say, stop it. Because at some point it's like, it's more fun if you don't think about it. Right. And like, there's a critique to be had for that approach to media. Right. Like, but like what I'm trying to dissect in that moment for myself is usually like, of all of the things that I understand with how weird this movie is, or the weird little moments, or the ways that it was just like, except this premise, it's the real world, except there's this fantastical Barbie land that's attached to it, right? Is like Will Ferrell's character, and like what is he? How is he? He's the CEO of Barbie, but he's like a caricature. He's not a real person, but he is a real person. And like trying to think about like, oh, like let's get deep and like let's think about like what role does he play? What is the commentary? And I was like, actually, just fucking forget it. It's just weird. It's just funny, right? Like, and so there's some of that like happening for me on my second rewatch, because like I said, it does feel a lot easier to like settle into the criticism this go around.
Yeah, I will say I had a similar experience and really leaned into it, taking my notes. So rather than saying no, I'm going to ignore it. So again, as always, like me having criticisms about it doesn't mean I don't like this movie.
Oh, for sure. No.
Like Jonathan and I saw it in theaters and we're just like screaming, laughing. And there were several moments that I had forgotten about today when I was watching it and was like, oh my God. But like the highest level, my biggest takeaway watching it this time was for a movie that sets out to have a message about feminism and women generally and society. It is a movie that is devoid of any conversations around or more complex conversations around gender and race and sexuality.
Yeah.
Right. And watching it this time, I was like, okay, but like if you spend 10 seconds of more thought on the thing that just happened in this movie, I'm asking questions.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know. I remember leaving the movie thinking like Allan felt like the butt of a joke a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And the movie didn't really explore that because it wanted to do the thing that you're saying. It wanted to like just like be happy, fun times and like also clearly have things to say that it's like not being very subtle about. Right. I was like, okay, so in that world, if I just accept it for what it was, why were we, I don't know, like panning to Allan when like Ken's taking his shirt off or something like that, right? Like, yeah, I don't know. Just like there's like little. That's the clearest example of the thing that I'm talking about. Yeah. But then you also have like President Barbie, right? And it's Issa Rae, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, sure. The movie is not. It doesn't. This is actually one thing it doesn't say. Well, I guess it does say out loud at one point that they have a black woman president, right?
Yeah.
Also, at the same time, none of that is ever commented on. Right. You have a trans Barbie. You have a Barbie that is bigger than the rest of them. Yeah. Right. You have Barbies of all different kinds of skin colors. And the movie, the way it handles that is just to almost say nothing about it. Right. For that to just be sort of a background thing. Anyway, I'm not going to spoil all of the feelings right now, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think like to some degree, like that is also more than anything, like I think like one of the first places that we see like the stamp of Mattel on this movie, not like literally in terms of like the brand imprint, but like it is a movie that is about a brand and that had to be greenlit by that brand. And so I think like there are some specific things that are like, no, it doesn't actually do anything to like really challenge or push the envelope around conversations about gender. It does not do anything to push the envelope on conversations about race. It doesn't do anything to push the envelope about the conversations of intersectionality, right? Like we're not talking about America Ferrera's character only being the secretary at this high-powered company, right? We are very firm in the ordinary women can do good things too territory, right? And like in that way, on this rewatch for me, one of the things that really stuck out to me was this is not a movie about Barbie. This is a Greta Gerwig movie. And so like, and I don't mean that in a like, in any way other than, you know, in this Vanity Fair interview that Gerwig did, she talks about how she really like admires like Christopher Nolan as an auteur, right? And like the juxtaposition of Oppenheimer with her movie and like how she felt about it. She was like, it's kind of fun. Like it's like at a film festival, you know, you're watching all these films back to back or whatever. And you know, she compliments Nolan's like presence or like the way that he approaches movies as just having this strong point of view, but like that's also true about her movies. Greta Gerwig's movies, like I was really, really struck in this movie about how Barbie is so much like Greta Gerwig's other main characters, is Jo March, is Lady Bird, is Frances Ha, right? All of these women are having stories told about them, about like the unbearable burden of responsibility and like the giving up that happens before perseverance. Like, I think I said it in another way in my notes. Let me see what I wrote down. I wrote down something smart, I think. Let's see. What did I say? Oh, yes. A woman who has been burdened with responsibility she doesn't want, choosing surrender before choosing perseverance. And I think that that is like just classic Gerwig, right? That these are the women at the center of her films. They are choosing surrender. They are making a bad choice. They are making a mistake. They are throwing it all away. They are saying it would be easier if I just let go. Or like they are somehow burdened by responsibility they don't want to have. And for like Frances Ha, the responsibility is just like growing up, right? It's not anything other than like this challenge of like your friends are moving up and moving on without you. And what do you do, right? In Lady Bird, the responsibility that she's burdened with is managing her relationship with her mother, right? She doesn't want the weight of this relationship. Jo March doesn't want the responsibility of caring for her family. She wants to be an independent person, right? Like all of her Barbie doesn't want to be stereotypical Barbie anymore at some point, right? She doesn't know what she is. And she like, I think this struck me the most in the moment where she like, does the iconic, like, I quit, like I give up, just sits down, lays down, face down on the ground, like fully like lets it go. That is what I clicked. Yeah.
Emotionally and physically.
And physically. So anyway, I think that really struck me like as my overarching takeaway. This is a Greta Gerwig movie,
Yeah. Do you want to try and go through our notes as if we were watching the movie together?
Yeah, why not? I mean, good as a format as any.
So you referenced the beginning of the movie, but I do want to call out, you said the thing about Mattel's influence. It's the first thing I noticed when I saw the movie. There's a big Mattel logo right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we've been watching Marvel movies for, forever at this point. So it's not something we're not used to. I think it's almost a build on that. But immediately I was like, okay, this movie is trying to do something, and whatever it does will be in the context of that Mattel logo.
Yeah, for sure. Right. And like there were all of those stories when the movie first came out about like what scene did Mattel veto, right? Because they're apparently they did veto the inclusion of something. There was like some scene that had to be approved by the executive, like by the CEO of Mattel themselves, right? Like that there was this oversight of brand quality by the company itself, right? There were maybe directions that Greta Gerwig wanted to push this movie or this story, but she had to be on the rails with like company approvals. And like, I think that, in one of these other interviews, she talks about, Gerwig talked about I can't remember which Barbie it is, but one of the Barbies like is the Barbie that infinitely like famously said like, math is hard. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know.
Okay, so it's like one of the Barbies that like does like a slogan thing. And so she's in the movie. She is one of the Barbies that we see frequently. But they like chose not to have her say these slogans because it like just came off too weird. It like didn't fit the tone of the movie, right? And like that's the thing is like Greta Gerwig can make an art film. And like, while this film needed her like artistic perspective on film, and it sings because of that, it is also not an art film, right? It's not doing the kind of cultural analysis that an art film is usually trying to do.
Your notes start with 2001: A Space Odyssey.
That's how the movie starts. The movie starts with 2001:
It's also
Space Odyssey.
the first trailer we ever saw, right? I mean, at this point, I think most of the people have either seen the movie or seen the trailer, But it's a really incredible little sequence. There's the quote, "The dolls were always and forever baby dolls." Something about the girls could only ever play as mothers. And there's this line, because Barbie can be anything, women can be anything. And I think it's that entire monologue is said tongue in cheek.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. And it's like presenting this idea of girl boss feminism that the movie is, I think, going to attempt to take apart.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I just remember watching it the first time being like, I hope this is not what this movie is doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like really the first line that is truly played for laughs, right, is thanks to Barbie, all problems of feminism and civil rights have been solved. Yeah. And like, that is supposed to be an absurd statement that you laugh at. Like, haha. Yeah. And I think that, right, like this. One of the other things that I think is like worth saying is that there is the little girl in this opening sequence with the bright blonde hair with like the blunt bangs and the glasses. Now, I did not get glasses until I was in high school, but I cannot overstate how much as a child I looked like this little girl. Amazing. With just like my like white blonde blunt bangs, just like feral as fuck.
Just like smashing baby heads into teacups.
Smashing baby dolls. Just I really. Now, I will say my mom would take objection to I wasn't really a big baby doll smasher. I was much more likely to set them all up and give them a lengthy lecture, which is true. I used to have school for all of my toys. So, yeah, anyway, but I think that like, yes, it's tongue in cheek. It's like, we know what we're doing. Okay. We're going to talk about this thing and we're going to set it up for you. Like, this is not going to be the glitz and glam of like everything is perfect, because we are setting you up for it's gonna get fucked, you know?
Yeah. Sorry, I was laughing because I was reading what you had next, and it looks like the next part of your notes is like purely about the aesthetics of Barbie Land, and we're just looking to talk me through them.
Correct. For me, there are so many things about the aesthetics of Barbie Land that make it so perfect. I think the number one and number two things for me are, one, just like the visual scale of the objects that the actors are interacting with, which is to say the scale on everything is just a little bit off, right? And if you've played with dolls a lot in your life, you know that often doll accessories and the scale of doll accessories from doll houses to like Barbies across the board is just a little bit off sometimes, right? Barbie is so tall compared to her car, right? Barbie is so large compared to like the street trash can when compared to like a regular person, right? So when they're like, when the sanitation workers like have the smaller than is normal size, like trash cans, but the packages are all the right size. Like there are things that are appropriately scaled, and it's more about like this mix of scale. And then the other thing is like the textures of the ground that are there around it, like this plastic looking thing, right? When she walks across the water coming down the slide in this opening sequence, it's like slightly glowing, like it had like the lights that are inside the toy, right? Like it really gets this element of a constructed reality that speaks to you as both implicitly natural for the like characters that you're seeing to interact with. There's nothing that is odd or off about it that isn't played as a joke or isn't like, it's not aware of that. Take, for example, Ken running into the plastic waves and cartwheeling through the sky, right? Like, it's like, yes, haha, these are toys. They are in a toy land. It is all fantastical, but it like does this so successfully by playing on those familiar like textures and scaling that we know from like playing with toys ourselves as kids.
Yeah. The thing that always sticks out to me is the sort of like painted backgrounds.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's always just like a vibe in any case where you see that, but here it really works to set the scene alongside the other things that you mentioned. Even
when, you know, the humans make it to Barbie Land, one of them comments and says, you can see through all of the houses, right? And that's just like a thing that's always true about Barbie houses is you can see at least on one side, you can see into them, right? I don't know if your sister ever had a Barbie dream house, or if you ever like remember playing with one or seeing with one, but some of them were like on the front, on the facade was like a normal facade, and then on the back it was open. Mm-hmm. And then there were also ones that like opened, like had a hinge on them so they could close. Yeah. And then would open and be open inside. Yeah,
we didn't ever have any of that. We had a lot of like kitchen toys in our house growing up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also did not have Barbies until I was 8 years old. So that was a parentally set bright line of no Barbies pre-8, because Barbies pre-8 could lead to me having unrealistic expectations for the female form.
So your life was like, this movie is directly in conversation with your early life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that too. Like, and also like, I think like the context of that being the reasoning for not allowing me to have Barbies, alongside like allowing me to do things like ballet in the 90s and early 2000s, when, I mean, still to this day, kids struggle with this, but like when there was less and less protection, or less than now protection for kids who like were struggling with eating disorders, or like were struggling with expectations about the shape and size of their body, that like, okay, you're not allowed to have Barbies because she's destroying feminism, right? She's making you want to be like a cookie cutter woman who wears heels and is a girl boss, right? And makeup and like does all of these things to perform femininity. But we can put you into an intensive like class where you will constantly be commented, your body size and the way that you are physically presenting in the world will always be commented on and critiqued. Like, is so interesting to me. And I think like, so in that way too, right? Like this movie speaks to the decision over whether or not to have Barbies was one that was fraught for our parents, my parents' generation. Right. And so like in that way too, right? I am here with this movie and the way that the story that it wants to tell.
Yeah. My version of that growing up was, I was not allowed at different periods of time to watch Power Rangers because of XYZ reasons. Like somebody decided it was too violent or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, there was all that kind of stuff when we were kids. You call out specifically Sharon Rooney and Hari Nef and their versions of Barbie. And what are you comparing there?
Okay. So one of the things that I think here is, right, I have thought a lot about the ways that this movie does inclusion, right? And the way that, to your point earlier, right, that never really dives deep into the conversations that it's having about inclusion, right? They are present. There's no question, right? This is like a very successful, like liberal feminist, like it is all good if all of these people are present, right? Approach. Right. And I think what really strikes me though is like, there is a huge contrast between how Hari Nef's character and Sharon Rooney's character, their two Barbies, get treated in that world in terms of like styling and like actual like lines and presentation, when they get played for laughs versus when they get to be their own autonomous agent. And so I have autonomous person, right? They get their own autonomy. I have a lot of like, I don't want this to seem like I'm pitting these two things against each other, but this liberal feminist framework requires us essentially to do so, right? Like it essentially says like the only way that you can critique these women is to compare them to each other. And we are not supposed to compare women to each other, right? We're not supposed to compare the treatment of women to each other per like this film's narrative. Everyone should get to be unique and individual in their own way. And like, I don't know whether or not Sharon Rooney got to have a say and how she was costumed. I don't know if the costumes were to her liking, but it's pretty noticeable to me that while she is there and she is fat, I guess I haven't said that to this point.
Right.
Sharon Rooney is fat, right? And I am fat, and I think a lot about fat politics, especially with relation to Barbie, because of the aforementioned eating disorder culture that I grew up in, right? And so what I'm thinking a lot about is like, Sharon Rooney is fat, Hari Nef is trans. They both have speaking roles as Barbies, but But Sharon Rooney's character is covered up in ways that other Barbies are not. She wears long sleeves. She wears leggings, right? And again, if that was the actress's comfort level, if that's Sharon Rooney's comfort level, then cool, chill, I'm good with it. But it does feel like there is something to be said of like, is it actual successful representation? Is it actually making it so that we are equalizing the perspective of how being a woman is defined? Or are we still saying we can have fat women in this movie and there can be a fat Barbie, but she won't be as glamorous or as like scantily dressed as other Barbies?
See also Midge in this
Yeah,
movie.
Midge is a great example. I mean, as a whole, right?
Yeah.
Even Allan too, to some degree, right?
Right.
Even this character, and like, I think that like Allan and Weird Barbie and Magic Earring Ken and Sugar Daddy Ken, right? Like, all of these characters are mostly played for laughs. And thankfully, Harry Neff's character like does not get played for laughs. And that is a boon and an advantage. And I don't think that like at any point is Sharon Rooney's Barbie specifically like made fun of for her weight and her size, but it's more about like the context of her and her portrayal in the same way that like the context of Weird Barbie and Weird Barbie getting less weird over the course of the movie is one thing that bothers me. Like she has like less stuff drawn on her face and her hair gets more and more normal.
She looks more punk near the end of the movie than she does like weird.
So I don't know. I think like the costuming choices there and that she is the one who delivers the line, I have no difficulty holding both logic and feeling at the same time, and it does not diminish my powers, it expands them, is like this. And to be clear, that's Sharon Rooney's Barbie delivers that line. I do think that there is something to be said for it's a throwaway line because it is said by her. It's said by her and then it's cut away. And it feels like a line that is like so central to the film's thesis, but doesn't get like the equivalent time that other characters get when they say things like this.
If it was said by America Ferrera in that moment in the Weird Barbie house or whatever, like it would have been something people were quoting and talking about, right? I still think it's effective. I still think it's a good line.
100%.
My take on it this time was like, who is the movie speaking to when it's saying that?
Yeah, interesting.
Right? Like, I think the person that is getting like that, it's still in that section of like, we're introducing the world, we're introducing what Barbie Land is, who the Barbies are. And so it's still in that tongue-in-cheek kind of section of the Helen Mirren, voiceover telling you things that are so obviously, if maybe not true, just like there's a wink and a nod to it because there's like some deeper meaning that thing is not getting at.
Yeah.
I think you're meant to feel like cheering for this Barbie when she says that, and also that like there is something else happening.
Yeah.
Most people watching this movie don't disagree with Sharon Rooney's Barbie when she says that.
That's right. And I mean, I think that that's a good point too. Like, who is the audience for this movie? Who is seeking this movie out? And like they talked a little bit in like pre-stuff for the film about like millennial moms as being a large part of their audience and being like the future, right? But not as the primary audience, although I do think that this is a line that speaks really directly to millennial women, right? Like this is specifically, I mean, Matt, you know why this line exists, because Hillary Clinton ran for president in 2016.
Yes,
that's why this line exists in this movie.
Yeah, I agree. I also like that's the vibes it's giving me when I say that. Like, I'm like, who is this for?
It's for Hillary Clinton, actually.
Yeah, it's like it's giving me white liberal feminist vibes. And I don't think that it's like the thing about saying that is that like I don't think it's a bad thing to say. I don't think that even it's like a thing that you wouldn't hear a version of in the real world, because that idea is like broadly maybe not shared, right? Right? Like I would say we still live in a very patriarchal society that like at least subconsciously, a lot of people don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Even if you might ask them if they agree with that, they would be, of course.
Yeah.
Right. And Also, when you're making art that's like trying to push boundaries, which I think you have posed a good question of like, if Barbie, we should treat it as that. It feels like, okay, well, that feels like a few rounds ago.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's how I feel about a lot of this movie, right? And like, I think that, you know, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, right? But like, when we're talking about, right? When we're talking about who is this movie for? Who is the conversations about gender? Like, who is the audience for that? We are really like, this film is behind the movie saying, Barbie saying to Ken at the end, like, I'm sorry that I didn't give you support, right? Like, is an attempt to like correctly frame that patriarchy harms men as much as it harms women, right? But like, I have no difficulty holding both logic and feeling at the same time, and it does not diminish my power, and it expands them. That is a more revolutionary, like, thesis on gender when it's coming out of the mouth of a cis man, right? Because the complication has never been, the understanding has never been that women cannot hold both logic and feeling at the same time. It is that women are required to hold both logic and feeling at the same time to navigate the world in a way where cisgender men get to say that they are operating on logic when they're actually operating on feeling, right? And so like, the ways that this movie tries to encompass and make up for this very matriarchal structure in the front end of the movie, right? By acknowledging the ways that patriarchy does harm men in this world, right? By Barbie ignoring Ken and making him feel unwanted and less than, he was engaging in the same kind of self-comparison, right? That women are often engaging in, right? It's a flipping the script kind of thing, but it flips the script. And just because it flips the script doesn't mean that it is like actually challenging or pushing back against like patriarchal norms. I think you're very right to point out that what it really does is say, hey, we all live in the patriarchy. Did you know that? And the answer for the target audience of the film is like, yes, I am aware of the patriarchy.
Yeah. I have one more thing to say, and then I want us to move on because I do want us to finish the introduction to Barbie Land section. I sent you a link to a video that I think, unfortunately, you can't watch yet. Jesse Gender.
I have not watched it, but I want to watch it.
Jesse Gender did a video called, the title is How Barbie Sissified the Matrix. And that is not sissified as in sissy. It is sissified as in cis. And let me tell you, Jesse is very aware of that in the beginning of the video, like spells it as sissified. And then it's like, that's not what I mean. And the thumbnail is gender nonconformity in a binary world. That video is only on Nebula right now. It's one of the like Nebula first, and then it'll be on YouTube. The premise of that video is like, if we take the now understood reading of The Matrix, right, as a trans story, this movie has multiple scenes that are directly referencing The Matrix, and it basically is the plot structure of The Matrix.
Yes.
Barbie lives in not real world, right? And something happens. She is given a choice to either go to the real world and have her entire like life shaken up and you know, basically encounter trauma.
You're supposed to want to know.
Right.
You have to want to know.
Right. And she actually chooses to stay. And Weird Barbie says, no, you've got to go. Like,
I just gave you a choice so you could feel like you had some sense of control.
Jesse points out that like you see Ruth Handler when Barbie goes to Mattel, and she points out that it's almost exactly the scene where Neo meets the Oracle in The Matrix.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just thought it was a really cool framing. But her like general point is that where The Matrix shakes things up in a real way and really recontextualizes the world for Neo. Yeah. What Barbie does is take patriarchy and not turn it into matriarchy, which is a different structural thing. It instead just is like reverse patriarchy. Yeah. Right? It's the same world. It's ruled by the same rules, right? I mean, all the things we just talked about gender and race, right? And sexuality, and I would say also capitalism, are all still the same. Yeah. It's just who's in charge is different.
Yeah. 100%. Right? Yeah. And I mean, I think like, you know, part of the reading that I did before this, I was like Googling around to see if there was anything like anybody had written about this. I was like, has Judith Butler written anything about the Barbie movie? I'm dying to know what she thinks of this, right? Like, what does Judith Butler think of this? Because like, I think that there is also something to be said for if it is just that cisgender women are in charge of the power structure, but the power structure is still doing all of the harms of patriarchy, then you are right. The system is still patriarchy. It is not matriarchy. And it is not even, it's not materially different, right? Like this is we could go into the philosophy of like the you only are ever able. This is why I was thinking of Butler specifically, right? Butler writes about how gender is not inherent, but it is also inescapable. I don't know how much Judith Butler you know or like.
No, I am saying right because that makes sense to me, not because I have heard it before.
Okay. So gender hegemony is performative in that it is like productive. So identity is an effect rather than a cause in Butler's framing. And so it's not like when Butler says that like gender is a performance, they do not mean that it is a theatrical performance. They mean that it is like the very act of doing it is to reinforce and create it at the same time. I'm really bad at explaining Judith Butler in a few words, although to be fair, there are not many people who can explain Judith Butler in a few words. But I think that like what Butler really talks about is that like all of these things are maintained under this heterosexual binary. All of these things are held up by heteropatriarchal systems. And we exist within these systems, whether we choose to or not. And the ways that we engage with gender opens the opportunity for transformation rather than like overcoming or escaping. We can transform the systems and like renegotiate them. I think the point here is, Matt, you're right. And
I mean, I think Jessie Gender's right. Jessie Gender's the smarter one that got me there.
Okay.
I just like really surface level ways, right, that this is shown to you is, I mean, simple things like the Kins have no say in what goes on.
Yeah.
Right. Which like that
they're just Ken.
It's intentionally absurd to prove a point. Right. And also it's like, if the world worked that way, that would also be wrong.
Yes.
Right. Barbie has this moment that she ends up apologizing for at the end of the movie, right, where she says, she basically tells Ken to fuck off and that she doesn't want to hang out with him.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I thought maybe I'd stay over. And she's like, it's the Barbie dream house, not Ken's dream house. Right. And he uses that against her later in the movie. But like the point being that like she was kind of an asshole to him. Yeah. Right. Not that she needed to sleep with him or whatever was implied, but that like she basically turned him down as like a human.
Right.
Right. Didn't respect him in certain ways. And my point is basically that the answer to that being true for women in the real world would not be in some fictional world to say, okay, now the opposite is true.
Right. For sure. I mean, I think that like the real world, like radical politics, like evolved version of this is a person says to you, maybe I thought I could stay over. And you say, no, thank you. I don't want that. And they say, oh, okay, cool, chill.
Yeah.
And then they you know, that's the conversation, right?
Yeah.
And like maybe it is brought up again, right? But like I think that one of the things that I did like about this movie was that at no point did it say that like the resolution of this would be not just that Ken and Barbie reconcile, but that they like get back together. And I do actually wonder if that was like a Mattel thing because of like, do you remember that Barbie and Ken are divorced?
I don't remember that, but that is incredible. And also, I also loved this about the movie.
Yeah. I mean, Barbie and Ken broke up like years ago. And it was like a whole big thing. It was like, oh my God, what's happening? Barbie and Ken are breaking up, all this stuff. But it's also like, what is that? How does that? There are so many there's so many Barbie storylines. In none of them not in every one of them is she with Ken until the end. So I did like that part of it. Like, I did like
Right.
that it was like, even at the end, she continues to be like, when he keeps leaning in for a kiss and she's like, no, that's not.
Still not interested.
Sorry,
That's not what I was trying to say.
Still not what's happening.
He does eventually get it too.
Yeah.
So we're getting towards a thing that I think can move us forward a little bit, which that the things that worked in this movie for me are the moments of self-discovery that both Barbie and Ken have.
Yeah.
Right. The moments that are making me cry in this movie are the scene with Barbie and Ken in the dream house at the end of the movie, right? The scene with Barbie and Ruth at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Both times where each of them are discovering things about themselves. Ken is discovering how to have value in himself without Barbie.
Yeah.
And Barbie is figuring out exactly what she wants to be in the universe.
Yeah.
Right? And the beginning of that is this incredible moment at a dance party that I know that you wanted to talk about.
Oh, you guys ever think about dying?
Oh my God. It's a great line. You said in your notes that you wish it wasn't in the trailers, and I share that sentiment.
I really, I mean, it was so funny in the context of the movie, but I think that like this is a really good example of when a trailer is really, really trying to reel people in and convince people. And like the Barbie marketing campaign, we could do an entire separate episode on. I am obsessed with it. I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was well done. I thought it was like the coverage was incredible from a marketing professional perspective. It was impressive. And like a testament to like what people can do if you give them an almost unlimited amount of money.
Right. And like, I don't know, in the last few weeks, we've seen like the Marvels tank,
Yeah.
right? I think there's a lot going on there, but one of them is that their marketing campaign was awful.
Yeah.
Right. They had a lot stacked against them.
Yeah.
But I, even just being like, I'm being a big Marvel fan, was like, man, they're really not doing a lot to sell this movie.
Yeah.
And I think it's partially because I think they were leaning on, it's a Marvel movie.
Yeah, familiarity, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
and appetite. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think that I wish they'd kept this out of the trailer so it would have had more punch when you saw it for the first time. But that being said, as someone who has for my whole life struggled with anxiety and depression, what a perfect encapsulation of what it's like to be at a party and having a really good time, but still being like fucked up in your brain.
And as the person who is always the constant oversharer in moments when, you know, like that's not maybe the vibe, I
Yeah.
totally felt this.
Yeah. Yeah. And like literally you're like having the best time and you are thinking about death and dying. Like it is irrepressible thoughts of death and dying Barbie. Like that's me. And I think that like that's part of the point, right? Is like that, you know, these Barbie creations that America Ferrera's character comes up with, right? Like are very real to like the way that we experience the world. But I also thought that it was very funny that without knowing, right? So just the trailer existing and the marketing campaign doing the like this kind of Barbie, right? Like, or this Ken, whatever, right? The frames that you could put yourself into to add those kinds of things. People were making those kinds of jokes before the text of the movie was even available to them, right? So that kind of like irrepressible thoughts of death and dying Barbie is so reflective of like the organic experience of like being an adult trying to relate to a children's toy world of like everything is fine and normal. Here's what I'm brushing under the rug, right? It's about that juxtaposition. And I think it just really works as a moment and is so funny.
Yeah, I love how long they let you sit in the silence too.
Yeah.
I will say I don't have anything to talk about until the real world. So if there's things that you want to talk about between here and there.
The thing that makes the movie for me is the references and the jokes. I think that like there's a lot that's happening textually in the movie, but really on the rewatch, like I am here for the moments that made me laugh and I'm here for the specific references. And I can't let this episode move forward without talking about one of the absolute funniest things in the whole movie that I feel like it's no acknowledgement is when Barbie's feet go flat, okay? First of all, kudos. I hope Margot Robbie, she should have negotiated for a bigger contract. I will just say she really put her feet on main in a movie a lot. When the Ken on the beach, is like up on the beach stand, and they're talking, and she's like, the flat feet, and they're all making puking noises.
Yeah.
That the Ken on the tower is also making puking noises.
It's Kingsley Ben-Adir.
So funny. Why is this so funny, Matt? Kens have flat feet. Kens have flat feet. Why would he be grossed out?
Yeah.
He has flat feet. I mean, I know it's because the Barbie has flat feet, whatever, but it is so funny to me.
This is where Harry Neff like just shows like her incredible personality in this movie. For me, her reaction to the flat feet, also when they're doing the sort of like heist at the end of the movie, she's incredible in that. She's like one of my favorite Barbies in this movie.
She's so funny. I don't get my criticism of like how the movie sets her up wrong. I love her in this movie. Okay, so it's that. It's the Birkenstocks, right? You have to want to know. I just gave you a choice so you feel a sense of personal control. That's a personal attack. That's a personal fucking attack, okay? The Indigo Girls, I can't believe that an Indigo Girls song is the song that was chosen. I mean, I can believe because Greta Gerwig turned 40 this year, and we're of the same musical generation.
Carlisle, isn't it?
Yes, it is the Brandi Carlisle cover of Indigo Girls. Yes. And I mean, I think that really the one thing that is missing is they should have let Simu Liu and Ryan Gosling kiss.
I was just to say they picked all of the hottest men that are currently acting right now.
Yeah.
They have Ryan Gosling, Simu Liu, Kingsley Ben-Adir, who I just mentioned, Scott Evans, holy fuck.
Yeah.
And you also have, Ncuti Gatwa, who is at some point soon going to be the Doctor, if that didn't happen at the end of last night's episode.
Yeah.
Just like a bunch of gorgeous actors who are currently in the zeitgeist.
There should have been more kissing. That's actually my takeaway of a lot of things. There should have been more kissing.
Also, John Cena is in this movie. I do not include him in that list.
John Cena, incredible as a Mer King. And then I think that actually maybe the funniest line in the whole movie. Yeah, I think the funniest line in the whole movie is she thinks I'm a fascist. I don't control the railways or the flow of commerce.
Oh my God. So we have to talk about Sasha. Okay. So premise, Barbie has realized that she has flat feet, that things are wrong. She goes to the real world to try and cheer up the person that is playing with her, maybe. That's what she thinks she needs to do. And she goes and finds Sasha, who we will later discover is not the little girl that is playing with her, but is that woman's daughter. And they paint Sasha as this vicious teenager. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite lines in the movie is they're sitting there with three other girls, and they all go, "Come on, Sasha, give it to her. Destroy Barbie." Oh my God, it's so perfect.
It's so perfect.
Yeah, and then later on, Barbie's crying and talking about how Sasha called her a fascist. And,
I do think that it's really interesting too, because that's one. There are a couple moments in this movie where the teen dialogue writing feels really spot on to me to how I do hear teenagers today talk, and that was one of them. That fascist is clearly hurled as an insult. I just think that it's really funny of this just this strict again the tongue in cheek Barbie only knows this term and in the sense of its strict definition. And she says, "I don't control the railways or the flow of commerce." But do you know who does control the railways and the flow of commerce in Barbie Land, Matt? Barbie.
Will Ferrell?
No, Barbie. Barbie is the president. Barbie is the Supreme Court. Barbie is their entire government. It is a fascist Barbie government.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. That's incredible. I love this part of the movie, and I also love basically everything about America Ferrera's family.
Yeah. Oh my God, the husband.
There's a scene. Oh my, yeah. There's a scene where they pan to the dad and he's doing Duolingo on the couch. I swear to God, we walked out of that movie and Jonathan goes, "That was you." And I was like, fuck it, I know.
When he says "si se puede" at the end, she's like, "That's
a political statement.
That's appropriation, Dad. Don't say that."
Oh my God. Oh, also another way that Sasha feels real to me is when they're kind of coming to she's like breaking out of her slump and she starts talking, just basically doing a speech. And Sasha goes, "Hell yeah, white savior Barbie."
And I mean, in that way, right? That is Greta Gerwig trying to do the like, I know, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's lampshading for sure.
It does feel that way, right? Like it does feel like if you are someone for whom the critiques that are presented in this movie fall short, this also feels like it falls short, right? This sort of like self-reflexive poking fun at like, this is the most, the strongest thing she could say about herself.
Yeah. So I brought up the moments near the end of the movie that worked best for me, which are, in the dream house with Ken and also that sort of final scene with Ruth. But the one that I walked out not being able to forget is the scene in the park. It is a scene of Barbie, like, basically observing different forms of humanity that are not extreme happiness. They're not all bad, but she does see a couple having a fight. She sees a guy looking sad, and then she sees this old woman on a park bench just living life and says, "You're so beautiful." And that woman says back to her, "I know it." And they just like kind of stare at each other for a little bit. But I read something right after this movie that kind of this scene was both impactful and felt weird to me. And the thing that I read right after the movie came out was that like, she's never seen an older person before. Like, that's just like not a concept that she has in her head.
Yeah.
Right. Even the idea that she would know what a child looked like. Yeah. Is interesting. The writer of this, I don't remember who it was basically like, it is like feasible to like in fiction assume that like this is the first time she's encountering this kind of person and she finds them beautiful because of that. Yeah. Right. Do you know who that person is?
I don't. I did think to maybe look it up, but I didn't do that.
People thought it was Barbara Handler, who Barbie is named after. Right. So the person sitting on the bench that Barbie says this to, her name is Anne Roth, and she is she's an Oscar-winning costume designer and a personal friend of Greta Gerwig's.
Okay, cool.
So that's who she's talking to there.
I really love this moment because I do think that this moment was poignant for me because of the aging aspect. One of the things that I struggle the most with in my relationships with women who are like older than me particularly, and I say that only because they are primarily who I've had these kinds of conversations with, is how much fear, like the aging is the worst thing that can happen to you, right? Right. And that like getting older, having wrinkles, having liver spots, having sun damaged skin, that these are the things that are like that make you undesirable over time, right? And I, as someone who wasn't confident that they would get to grow old, am like so excited by the idea that like I will get to grow old and there will be visible signs of aging in my body and in my face. And it makes me genuinely so sad when people express dislike for themselves around like traits that they have because of aging. I liked this moment because it felt so real and authentic. There's a version of this moment where, the woman cries or the woman doesn't know what to say or says she's so beautiful. But I do also feel like it just has a little bit of that like old lady magic where sometimes you say something like that to an old lady and they're just like, yeah, I fucking know it. And those old ladies rule. So I think that this is also a moment in the film that gives me that same big emotion feelings as the moments with Ruth do.
It reminded me a bit of the parts early on in the movie where the Barbies are doing incredible things and just saying like, I deserve this, right? I don't remember what they call her, but the Barbie that has like written something and gets a Nobel Prize for it or whatever, right? She's like, I worked hard and I deserve this. And that is played for laughs, but also like, this is a real human version of that sort of existing in this movie's real world, which is, I don't know, a nice comparison to see.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that like There are only a couple other moments in the movie that stand out to me that I wanted to make sure that we talked about.
Sorry.
Something catch your eye?
Yeah, in your notes you said the archival costumes made me yell, not the palazzos.
Okay, so I love this moment, both like one of the things that I really liked about this film is like how playful it is in the way that like as like a film, it is very playful, it is very engaged with the audience, the way that it like mixes style and substance, right? That it has these little animated moments that make it feel fantastical, right? And so this sequence where Ken and Barbie are fighting, and Ken is throwing all of Barbie's clothes out of the dream house after they returned to Barbie Land. And it is becoming Ken's Mojo Dojo Casa house, which you don't have to say dojo or casa before you say house, but you do say it because it's fun. It's fun to say.
And it feels good.
And it feels good. Is, the clothes are flying into the air and then they're flat lay, and it's like it pops up next to it what the name of the clothing item is. And these are all real things from the Barbie archive, right? And I really love like that's archival, right? Like these are like these things. And the way that Margot Robbie says, not the palazzos, like just like so genuinely devastated that the palazzo pants have been thrown out of the Barbie dream house is so funny to me. But it's also like was a really touching and exciting moment for me as like a film nerd, like to see costumes portrayed like and like part of what makes Barbie iconic is not just Barbie herself. It is her clothes. It is her style. And so like to see the clothes themselves get this kind of shining moment because their clothes and the style are all over the film. She is impeccably styled. She is always wearing something that is referential to a real Barbie dress until the very end. And I really enjoyed this. I also, growing up, had a family friend who she would hand sew Barbie clothes, and like making your own Barbie clothes used to be a lot more common, as did many other, right, like small handcrafts. But yeah, I thought it was really exciting too, because there's this like element of the person who designed those styles all of those years ago is like now getting to see this like honorary moment of the palazzo pants. Anyway, it's really funny. It's just a really funny moment.
Some of my favorite parts of like when the Kens have taken over Barbie Land are like the words that they use for things. So because they've never encountered a world where men are in control, they just don't have words for things. Like Ken tries to use he's like, you can be my bride wife. Yeah. And his long-term low commitment distance girlfriend. I love that there's no word between commitment and distance. Yeah. That's the funniest part.
Yeah.
And all the Barbies are handing them brewski beers.
Brewski beers. Yeah. It's very much giving I read one book energy.
Yes, exactly.
I did not research, but I am curious if all of the titles of the books that Ken chose are real books from the real world. I should have researched, but they're all very funny.
Yeah.
I do really like that the whole thing about like patriarchy and horses, and like horses being to your point about not having words, horses are just men extenders. Is what Ken says at some point in the movie, is it just makes men taller when they're sitting on a horse. I don't know. Everything about it is, I mean, I think like the other thing that we're certainly won't be the first people to point out, but it is worth saying, everybody knows a guy who you've been to his house, and it's like that. And being from Oklahoma, I want to say, I used to date someone whose bedspread was a king-size comforter that looked like the Texas flag, okay? This is not fiction. It's real life, and I am owed emotional damages.
When you said we all know somebody whose house looks like that, I was picturing, and I will not include this in the show, I was picturing his house with his roommates.
You can just say, I was picturing redacted.
Yeah, I can just bleep myself out. Yeah.
in that fucking house that they lived in that used to be a dentist's office.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It was like that. Oh my God, with all their fish tanks.
Live there?
Did live there, yeah.
What a wild life we've lived.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to go through some of my favorite lines in this movie before we move on.
Okay.
There's we talked about the writer Barbie earlier. She has this line that basically when they go back to Barbie Land, the Barbies have been like, I don't know, brainwashed by the Kens to take on normative gender roles. And they break her out of that spell. And she says, it's like I've been in a dream where suddenly I was really invested in the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. Which I'm sure when it was written was extremely topical. But because that was such a moment, just like completely still lands in 2023.
It's so funny. I think the thing is, Matt, that like there are so many people who like, I like comic books. That's part of the things that are true about me that many people know. So many people are like, did you see the Zack Snyder Justice League cut? And I was like, no, why would I do that? I don't hate myself. I do like comics, but I don't hate myself.
I did in fact see it, and it was bad. They didn't rescue that movie.
No.
The movie was bad.
Yeah. Yeah, that line is very, very funny and was a personal attack.
Yeah. I love during I'm Just Ken at the end when they scream, I'll see you on Malibu Beach.
I'll see you on Malibu Beach. I think that moment segues into arguably the best sequence in the movie, right? Like, so the dream dance sequence, I was obsessed with. Like, that is the moment in theaters that the movie changed, and I was like physically freaking out, so excited that the dream ballet was happening, because I love dream ballets. I think that dream ballets are fascinating. They're a weird relic of a weird time in movie musicals. I think they're so just truly what the fuck. You're watching Funny Girl, you think you know what's happening, and then something else is happening. You're watching Oklahoma, you think you know what's happening, and then something else is happening. And it's like, I don't even know. Like, in this movie, it's so perfect. And then I read this in the Vanity Fair piece that Gerwig was interviewed for. She said there was some of that. You need what? Why do we need a dream ballet here? I was like, because it will be a delight. But there's always a moment with every movie where they say, you could cut this, you could cut that. And I end up saying, or we could cut the whole movie. We could just cut the whole movie. We don't have to do it. And I love that energy of defending the dream ballet, because I agree. It did need to be there, but also it didn't have to be there. That's always the thing about the dream ballet, is it never had to be there.
Right. For me, the context that I had for that kind of thing was like White Christmas.
Yes.
They work it into the story a little bit better, right? Which near like 3/4 through the movie, they're like at the lodge, like rehearsing for the big show or whatever. And that's when they have their version of a dream ballet.
Yes.
Right.
But the dream ballet in general, right? Like as a concept primarily is really only in that like era of like 40s to like late 60s movie musicals. Bye Bye Birdie has one, I think. I could look up a list, but I'm not going to. I think they're so funny. It was specifically for me. It was specifically for me that there was a dream ballet.
It's also in the context of that fight between, you know, like the Kens that is just funny in its own right. It's like the whole thing of, you know, Simu Liu's Ken versus Ryan Gosling's Ken. That is just hysterical. And they're like fighting each other with tennis rackets in fake slow motion. They're
finally beaching each other off.
Yeah, beaching each other off. Which, that's a line that was in the trailer that was so much better in the movie.
Yeah, it was better in the movie. I think it was also better in the movie because it's a joke that requires the right number of beats. I'm so sorry. It requires the right number of beats. And in the trailer, it didn't quite hit it. And in the movie, the callback especially made it that much better, you know?
Exactly. For me, my favorite sequence in this movie is like the deprogramming heist.
Oh my God. It's so
after
funny.
they've deprogrammed the first Barbie and they're like, oh, this is gonna work. And then they start, you know, going around and deprogramming other Barbies and distracting all the Kens, which leads to the plan to distract all of the Kens to take back Barbie Land.
Yeah.
It's so funny, and it lets all of the actors do some of the best work, I think, in the movie.
Yeah. I think it really relies on a format that we know and love of like the montage moments. It has some great like comedy in it, right? Like Allan trying to jump over the fence, Allan go around. It does, however, it is prompted by like a line in the movie that is like the last one for me that like I really have like big thinky thoughts about. So, you know, right before they move into this heist, America Ferrera goes on her long, you know, monologue that is very much like Greta Gerwig has said is like a monologue that she wrote, like that came out of a moment of frustration that is reflective of something that she started. But she really felt like America Ferrera finished. And I think that the monologue is good. I think that there's nothing wrong with the monologue. There is this moment, though, where it breaks the spell on one of the other Barbies to finally deprogram her. And what they say is, by giving voice to the cognitive dissonance required to be a woman under the patriarchy, you've robbed it of its power. And I
have a lot of feelings too.
I have so many feelings about this. I think that in the framing of the movie, it is a fun way to explain what broke the spell. And acknowledging the cognitive dissonance does not do the work of robbing patriarchy of its power.
If it did, like, liberal snark would work and would like change all Republicans' minds.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
yeah. Rhetoric won't save us from the like physical harms of patriarchy. And I just like, I get it in the context of the movie, but this is one where this is, you know, there's a lot of discussion about like, is this movie second wave feminism, third wave feminism, fourth wave feminism? Is it something outside of those positioned outside of those in a different way? And I think that this is something that for me really clearly situates it as third wave feminism, right? Like really says that our place where we are, the place where this movie lives, is that it says that the most powerful thing that we can do is acknowledge that we are living under cognitive dissonance and that we can rob patriarchy of its power by acknowledging that we can be more than one thing at once. And if it really thought that, then it would have done more about gender in the movie. Like it would have been, it would have not been as implicit that the Birkenstock is the truth choice from Kate McKinnon's clearly lesbian weird Barbie, right? And it would have thought more about the fact that they said that the weird Barbie is the lesbian Barbie, thus implying that lesbians are weird, right? Like it would have done more to interrogate itself if it actually thought this as a movie. So
yeah, I fully agree. I do think that the America Ferrera monologue is so good.
Yeah.
And I think is cross-applicable in ways like across like all kinds of communities. I think is maybe one of the most... I think it's a time where the movie kind of stumbles into intersectionality, right? Without recognizing it, because those are feelings that I'm sure everyone feels, but I think specifically, you know, various minority groups feel in different ways.
Yeah.
I think it is specifically written from the perspective of women, but the idea that we, you know, she says we twist ourselves into knots, right?
Yeah.
Like that idea of like trying to be 17 contradictory things to fit the mold that society is looking for, and the frustration that it eventually brings is something I really feel. I said on an earlier episode that like one of the ways that I express queerness is through the kink community, right? And that perspective comes from specifically this pressure, right, that I think we all grew up with, but I specifically grew up with in my particular environment, to repress sexuality, right?
Yeah.
To not talk about those things in public places. And I've gotten to the point in my life where like my reaction to that is to do my best to protect myself in ways that like let me keep living, right? But besides that, be like, no, fuck it. I am in this way liberated, and I'm going to acknowledge that this is a part of my life, that sexuality is important to me. And that's all to say that, like, I understand the frustration that Gloria, we keep saying America Ferrera's character.
Sorry.
Her name's Gloria.
Her name is Gloria.
Fine.
Yeah.
Her name's Gloria. The frustration that Gloria is laying out, like, that's the way that it takes shape for me in my personal experience as, like, a cis gay man.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's really stellar. And I think had the movie not had that, a lot of other pieces wouldn't have come together.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, I think that, like, the thing for me, right, is where it misses is it lays the site of this, like, tension, the site of this harm on gender, on womanness, on patriarchy, right?
Yep.
And it misses that what it actually hinges on is, like, heteropatriarchal cisgender hegemony, right? Like that actually hinges on also capitalism, right? Like that is actually really capitalism and the ways that capitalism must be maintained and white supremacy and capitalism must be maintained for these things to have to be true, right?
Right.
And that the pressures that we experience, those things that say that the parts of us that are not conforming, right? Then when we are gender non-conforming, when our sexuality is non-conforming, right? That non-conformity, the site of that non-conformity is in patriarchy, not in capitalism. And so that's like also a miss for me, right? Like that not thinking about the entire hegemonic form.
Yeah. I do wish the movie had recognized the things and had spoken, at the very least, spoken to the individual community groups, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't have to go to, like, I'm going to make a movie like sanctioned by Mattel that says capitalism is bad and is the root of all of these problems. I get that that's not a thing, but at least you can say that, like, there is some amorphous system that we're not going to name that, you know, leads to patriarchy, which also leads to the othering of non-white people and the othering of people with genders that don't conform and the othering of people with sexualities that don't conform.
Yeah, I mean, and it, like, tries to do these things in some subtle ways, right?
Yeah.
All of the men in the boardroom are white men, right? All of the people in the boardroom are white men. There's not gender diversity or there's not, like, visible diversity among the people who are in the boardroom. But I also think that, like, there's a line in the movie where after Ken has taken over Barbie Dreamland, right? They're like, what does it matter? The toys are selling. Right? Like they're like, it doesn't matter. Like, we're still making sales. And Will Ferrell's character is like, no, Barbie is, like, you know, key to humanity. Like, we created Barbie for women everywhere. And, like, that's where it failed. Like actually, right? Like, it doesn't matter. That person is right. Mattel doesn't care if it's Ken dolls or Barbie dolls that are selling. It cares about selling toys, right? And, like, it cared about what this movie had to say, because if it said something too critical about Barbie as a concept, about the way that Barbie influences the world and is influenced by the world, then it might not sell as many toys, right? And, like, that's why my theory about which scene the Mattel CEO had to specifically approve himself was the scenes with Ruth, the scenes with the creator of Barbie, or the person who's positioned as the creator of Barbie, and most specifically the reference to, like, the IRS and, like, the tax fraud. Because I think that those are the things that are actually the company is interested in protecting its brand around and its branding around, because the rest of the movie is intended to be, you can watch this and make up your own mind. The movie is intended for people to be able to walk away from it with different perspectives. It has a perspective. It is telling you a story, but it is doing so in a way where people like you and me who are critical of it can enjoy it, right? This is what they said. This is what Greta Gerwig said about the movie before it came out.
If you love Barbie, you hate Barbie.
This is a movie for you. If you hate Barbie, this is a movie for you, right? And the most important thing in terms of brand integrity for Mattel is, how do we keep selling toys?
Yeah. I think that goes right into this quote. You shared a New Yorker article called Why Barbie Must Be Punished, Mothers, Daughters, and an Icon's Existential Crisis. And I read it and was floored by it. It's written by Leslie Jameson. And I pulled this quote from it. This is the fantasy of an artist or an analyst. This faith that giving voice to something will rob it of its power, and it gestures implicitly toward the larger aspirations of the film itself. That a corporate-sponsored film about Barbie could repair the damage she's done by describing it, the brand equivalent of a carbon-neutral flight, which I read and laughed the first time.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, Barbie is brilliantly imagined and endlessly delightful, but its social critiques are neither original nor disruptive. They ratify articles of shared liberal understanding so that the film can get on with the business of redeeming its heroine, giving us a Barbie we can stand behind.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to a lot of things we've said in like the last 10 minutes, right? Like, that is much better written than we have said out loud. But
sure.
Yes, I that line where he's like, I do this for the, the little girls, that play with Barbies, or like, my reaction to that was like, this movie really wants to try and critique capitalism without actually doing it.
Yeah, I really love the a couple paragraphs later. What she says about it is Barbie gets to eat from the tree of knowledge, and she gets to reconcile with her God. She does not have to choose. And I think that like. This piece is worth reading, and I think it's really, like Matt said, a smart, like you said, I'm talking to you. Fuck. Like you said, like a really, a much more like analytical and like thought-provoking or well-written way of articulating some of these things. But I also think that to the point that it is like endlessly entertaining, to the point that it is compelling and delightful, right? Like all of these things are true, and it's just a good movie. It's fun. It's fun to watch. It's well paced. It doesn't really ever lag. I mean, I could feel myself getting distracted because I'd seen it before, but nowhere near as much as like I was like fully like checking out at these points that I didn't like. I was still laughing at these lines a second time. I think that like all of these things are true, and Greta Gerwig built an incredible movie. I mean, the same is true of like me, and I could do a whole other episode about my feelings about Greta Gerwig's Little Women, how it compares to the original Little Women, which one I
seen it. Maybe we should.
No, I can't cry on the podcast, Matt. I can't cry on the podcast. And if we talk about Little Women and Lume Alcott, I will cry on the podcast, because then we'll really have to fucking talk about gender, and it will fuck everybody up. Okay. All right. So we're just going to say that, Gerwig's ability to build a movie that is thought-provoking and fun, delightful to me, and thought-provoking, like, I think it's also easy to think of anything that you see through the lens of, like, I am the audience for this, right? You are the audience in your mind. And the reality is that most people are not having conversations about gender in the way that I have them. Most people are not having conversations about capitalism in the way that I have them. And so like, I love this forum because it's an opportunity to like introduce these kinds of ideas to you. If maybe, you hadn't thought of these things, or I hadn't thought of these things, or if people who are listening who hadn't thought of these things. But I also like think that this movie is a feat to making something that does have mass appeal in a superbly interesting way. I
have a completely left turn for you.
I'm ready.
It's my take that this movie kills stereotypical Barbie.
Oh, you think she's dead?
No, I don't think that like the character died.
Oh.
I mean that the concept of stereotypical Barbie is abandoned by the world within the movie, and maybe potentially by Mattel.
I think that's right. I think Mattel has been trying to get away from the original branding of Barbie for decades at this point, right? The teacher Barbie, president Barbie, astronaut Barbie, right? Like the whole thing about Barbie is every girl and every girl is Barbie, or what is it? Because Barbie can be anything, women can be anything, right? Like is a like really subtle, right, reason that people say that Barbie is a feminist icon. It's because she had a job, and it's because she had a lot of jobs, right? So I think from the jump, right, like what Mattel is interested in doing in killing stereotypical Barbie isn't going after something new. It's returning to who Barbie was at the start in some ways.
Yeah, that's interesting. Does the end of this movie work for you? It works for me. Like, she becomes human, but I also don't know why it works. Like, I left the movie the first time being like, that made me cry. And maybe it was just the Billie Eilish of it all.
Yeah, the Billie Eilish of it all is really fucking good.
Yeah. But why? Right? Like, I didn't feel like any of the themes in the movie were leading up to Barbie's no longer a doll.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe I'm missing something. Like, in my opinion, in my experience, that's out of nowhere, but I didn't feel that coming. It worked when it got there, but I just didn't feel it coming.
Yeah, I don't know that I saw it coming either. And I don't know that it works. I think that a lot of things work for me. I don't think that the last line works for me. I mean, what the last line suggests, right? I'm here to see my gynecologist.
Right.
It suggests that going to the gynecologist is like the quintessential experience of being a woman. Right? Like it's the defining thing. And actually, I don't love that. We
can have a lot of gender conversations about it.
I don't love that, right? We got to start at that's a little bit gender essentialist of you, right? It's like you're not wrong that it is true that the vast majority of women do have this experience. However, it's kind of weird, right? And like it's weird from a movie where the perspective was otherwise like really intentionally centered around inclusivity, right? Because of the way that is like specifically exclusionary. And that's why it didn't land for me. But like, it's also, I don't think that line was for me, right? Is the other thing.
Yeah, that line is purely for laughs without thinking too hard about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Her becoming real, her moving into the real world, I think does work for me and makes me sad. And I agree with you, right? Like the idea is that stereotypical Barbie is no longer part of Barbie's dreamland. And I think that like, if we were to read into it more too, right? Like, is Dreamland better for that, right? Is Barbie better for being in the real world and learning the real consequences of living life?
Yeah. When I watched it this time, because I went in the two ideas I had in my head when I put on the movie today was, I want to find out what the fuck is going on with Allan.
God, we barely even talked about
the
Allan.
Thumbs up bubble.
Thumbs up.
And I want to figure out, like, did this movie even hint that this was going to happen? And I think the best that it does is that Barbie and Ken follow separate journeys of self-discovery.
Yeah.
Barbie starts in that park, right? Seeing various people being, living life and being human themselves, and ends with her becoming a human because she's understood these more complicated feelings. Ken's is a little bit more surface level, but is also about ingesting new information based on real men, right? And figuring out how to evolve, his own masculinity.
Yeah. I think it's worth saying maybe her story, Barbie's story, even begins before she is observing people and seeing people in the world. Maybe it begins when she starts having those irrepressible thoughts of death, right? Yeah. Because what that means fundamentally, right? She's contemplating her own mortality, and she chooses, in theory, right? She chooses mortality. She chooses to live a life where she will age and presumably die. And I think that like, it is interesting that the moments of the most connection that you see her have, where she is, aside from like the moment with Gloria, when she first sees Gloria and her kid is like, are you fucking shining with Barbie right now? Which is so funny. But like, are primarily with older women, with Ruth, with the woman at the bus stop, right? Those are the moments where she is connecting with someone and seeing a future version of herself that she wants for herself. And so I think that it is interesting that that's the choice that she makes with the context of like, those are the people that she connects with the most. Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about the Barbie movie?
Yeah, I agree to be a Supreme Court judge as long as I get to wear a robe. Well, actually, they're not allowed on the Supreme Court. That's too quasi.
Right. I love that Issa Rae's like, we can't do that. Like, we can't do
quasi,
that.
Yeah, no men on the Supreme Court. But
and I think there's a Helen Mirren voiceover too that says they got to start somewhere or something. something.
Yeah. I actually let's give I want to do a minute for the voiceover and a minute for Allan, because we have referenced Allan so many times, we haven't directly talked about him. A minute for the voiceover. I think, like I said, one of the things that I love about this movie is the way that it has like all of these little atmospheric moments that make it feel magical or off, right? Mm-hmm. In the moment where the guy runs up behind Barbie on in California, like on Long Beach, and smacks her ass, right? And you see him coming, the spin and the turn, right? So cinematic. One of the other is this just absolutely absurdly well-placed Helen Mirren voiceover when Barbie is having her meltdown and she's crying. And so Barbie is crying and she's crying, and it's Margot Robbie, and they have her styled so she is as plain-faced as is possible on like a movie camera, and she's crying and she's like, I'm ugly and everything's bad, and just like, I'm not beautiful. I've never been beautiful. And Helen Mirren's voice cuts in as like, note to the like movie directors in the future, if you want to make this argument, Margot Robbie is like too pretty to make this argument. Basically, I don't remember exactly what she says. Note to filmmakers, Margot Robbie is not the right person to cast to make this point. Yes. Yeah. It's so funny. It's that's so funny, because I think that is the moment where it's like, yeah, that's what everybody's thinking. She's like, I'm so ugly. And it's like, Margot Robbie, you're not. You're a pretty crier, actually, and it hurts my feelings.
It's funny. When I was searching for that, the reason I couldn't find it is because I searched note, and apparently I spelled it not because I was typing so fast, so I was laughing.
Okay, so that's a minute for the narrator and the voiceover. A minute for Allan.
So Allan, to me, I asked the question, what the fuck is going on with Allan? And I think what the fuck is going on with Allan is that he's mostly played for jokes.
Yeah.
The moment you mentioned earlier where they're like doing the heist and he's like trying to like go over the fence and they're like, go around, Allan.
Yeah.
Great moment. Also, the moment where he's in the back of the car.
Yeah.
And like pops up and they repeat the same thing that happened with Ryan Gosling's Ken at the beginning of the movie. It's
full of second beats. It's full of second beats.
Very good. And also the fact that he just like fucking wails on those dudes.
Yeah, I was about to say, I actually think that the thing that makes the comedy of him like not being able to successfully jump over the fence is that he absolutely walloped a bunch of other Kens to the point where it's like, you want to go? And they like all run away. And then they just turn the car around.
Yeah, it's the only time he's like painted as like stereotypically masculine as well, is that scene. And again, played for laughs.
I think it's so funny because that does not read as stereotypically masculine to me. It reads as just he's fucking crazy. Like he's just feral as fuck.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I was just like, I was like watching it this time. I was like, oh, they really don't have much to say. Like it's just gay jokes all the time.
Yeah.
And like none of it's hurtful. Right.
No.
But I was like looking for a little bit more from this movie.
And I mean, I think that like it is worth saying, like Michael Cera's delivery as Allan is impeccable. Yeah. It is played for laughs and it is funny.
Yeah, it's funny.
It's very funny. I do think that like it doesn't do enough. Like I wish that the whole joke is he's Ken's buddy. All of Ken's clothes fit him. And not once did they put Allan in Ken's clothes.
Exactly. And also, like, he gets mistaken for Ken when they're, like, walking up to the, like, weird Barbie house or whatever. I was like, that could have been the moment.
Yeah. I think that, like, that is... I love Allan in this movie, and justice for Allan, justice for the jokes that could have happened. And I do also feel the same way about Magic Earring Ken and Sugar Daddy Ken. You know that those are real Barbies, right?
Yeah. Okay. I just assumed that everything in this movie was real.
So, I mean, I think that, like, the thing is that between Allan, Magic Earring Ken, Sugar Daddy Ken, Weird Barbie, there are some weird moments in terms of heterosexuality and heterosexual narratives in the movie. Like, for a movie that does so much about feminism and so much about escaping gender norms, it does very little to actually give good critique about escaping heterosexuality, right? It has gay characters. It has presumably queer subtextually characters, as implied by the way that they speak, interact with other people. But it's never explicit. And to your point, it's always played for laughs. And that means that it falls short as a film that's trying to do gender critique. Because if your gender critique is only that cisgender women and cisgender men deserve more power and connection in society, then that's not.
Yeah, I want to throw
That's not
Midge
anything.
in there too.
Sure,
I mean,
Midge, yeah.
And that's not like gender and sexuality. That's just like pregnant women, right?
I mean,
and
Midge is a really fucked up and weird doll. I gotta
correct.
say,
It's a weird doll.
So weird.
But I feel like they could have done the same jokes without making it look like, oh, this lumpy looking Barbie is, you know, the weird one.
Yeah.
And especially with like when we're talking about ability, there's a Barbie in a wheelchair at one point that feels like it's like purely there as tokenism.
Yeah.
I mean, much like a lot of the other Barbies,
Yeah.
frankly. I in my head was just comparing that Barbie who gets to be a part of things, right?
Yeah.
With Midge and who's, you know, constantly pregnant. Despite the, like the truth of the weirdness
Yeah.
of the doll
Yeah.
itself. And I don't know. I was just watching. I was like, why do these two people get to like have different experiences in Barbie Land?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the growing up Skipper doll, the other dolls that are like the weird dolls, right? I think like
Growing Up Skipper and the TV Barbie actually get really good. Like, hey, we're gonna joke about the gag, not
Yeah.
like the Barbie, the person, you know?
yeah. And so I don't know. I think that all of that is just, would it be too hopeful to want too much from the movie for it to do all of these things at once, right?
Yeah.
What does it even look like? What would it even look like if it was if it could do any of those things? Would it have been able to be the Barbie movie, or would it have had to be life-size doll movie, whatever?
Yeah.
Tyra Banks
I was
bullshit.
gonna say Tyra Banks. Oh my god. Oh my god. I feel like we have to do that movie now.
Life-size is so weird. Life-size is maybe weirder.
I think it's also weird that that and America's Next Top Model are like my two Tyra Banks things in my life.
I just am shocked. What other Tyra Banks things are there?
She had a TV show. She had like
the
a talk
Tyra show. Yeah. The Tyra show. Okay.
I didn't really see any of it.
Okay,
It's just
okay,
not like
okay.
a touch point I have. It's
yeah,
like
that's
life
not-
size and
yeah.
ANTM, specifically season like 20.
Yeah.
Double
I mean,
X2O, baby.
This makes sense to me. Yeah, I think that those are pretty much all of my thoughts about Barbie as a movie. I think, like, as I've said, yeah, kind of like in summary a couple times, right? Like, this movie made me feel things. It made me laugh. It made me cry. It made me frustrated with his politics. And for me, that's the experience of going to the movies, right? That's my experience watching so many films. And at the end of the day, this is a movie where when I take all of that away, when I do the let me shut my brain off when I'm thinking too critically about it and think about this movie was made for, if not for me today, this movie was made for a person that I used to be. And in that way, it connects with me and it made me feel good. It made me feel sad. It made me feel hopeful that like there was maybe a starting point in conversation with people in my life who I might want to talk more deeply about some of the issues that are like touched on even as jokes in the movie, right? Like that there are opportunities for us to expand our knowledge together and also just to like laugh and have sentimental moments, right? Like even in that New Yorker piece, right? Part of what she says is that like Barbies are so ubiquitous. They are so much a part of our culture. They are so much a part of our families that they are also fundamentally about motherhood and girlhood and growing up and parenting and not parenting, and like all of the choices that we make in our lives are connected to Barbie in some way or another. And like, I don't know. I really liked the movie.
Yeah. I mean, when I agree. When I watch this movie with the like critical side of my brain turned off, it is a blast. Yeah. Right. I can never fully turn that off. I'm always going to be me. But when I do my best, I have a great time. And even today, I was like, I'm taking notes because I want to be able to talk about it. But at the same time, I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I've shared all the moments that really worked for me. And also, like, there's parts of it that, like, and again, I've already shared these, but like that emotionally work for me. That work on like a really deeply human level too. So it's not just lighthearted, surface level fun. There are things that really matter to me in this movie as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we're really drilling down on it and we're saying, what's the thing that I'll never stop thinking about? I'll never stop thinking about P, panic, I'm scared, N, nauseous, K, death. That will be in my brain forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a good place to end the conversation. Before we sign off today, I want to let y'all know we are going to be taking a little bit of break for the month of December. I actually believe that you're going to be getting this in December because of the way that things work, but we will not be recording again until January.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that you all have a good holiday. AC, are you going to be in town for the holidays?
No, I'm not traveling this year. Okay. But I hope you have a great holiday. I hope it's as good as it can be and full of all of the things that bring you joy and rest. And, I'll see you in the new year.
In the meantime, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on the internet at acfacci.com. That's acfacci.com. All my stuff is linked there. Wow.
And you can find me and a bunch of my writing at matthorton.live. While I've got you here, captive, I have my annual Games of the Year video coming out the first week of December.
Woo!
I'm trying to time it with the Game Awards that are on December 7th. It won't be the same day. But it'll be around then. And I finished that edit up last night, and I'm really happy with it. So
check out Matt's channel.
Gonna be posting shorts and TikToks of some games that didn't make the cut as well.
Yeah.
So you can find the show at can'tletitgo.gay.
Yeah.
And you can find us on Instagram, Thread, and TikTok at can'tletitgo.gay. Thanks to The Worst Garbage. You can find The Worst Garbage Podcast Network at theworstgarbage.online. That's also where you can find the link to the Discord.
Come join us.
Hang out with us in Can't Let It Go, the channel in that Discord. And lastly, we want to shout out Scout for our art. Here, let's go find out if she has commissions open today. I need to remember to do this. Humble goat. Oh, commissions. Scout has commissions open. There's 3 slots. So if you want her to make you some art, you can go to ko-fi.com/humblegoat and pay her to make you some art. A lot of people in the TWG Discord have avatars that are drawn by Scout that we call scavatars.
Oh.
I have never done it because I really like my avatar, but at some point I just need to go ahead and do it because 1, she deserves to be paid, and also 2, she makes really good stuff.
This reminds me that while I hate AI filters, I did really think about doing the Pixar one of pictures of you and me before we met today, just to see what our version of that would be. But I also object to generative AI on moral grounds, so I didn't do that.
Fair. Shout out also to my friend Ethan at Pragmatism on Twitter for our music. And we'll see you in the new year with, you know what? We'll figure it out between now and then.
Hey, at the very least, I am going to talk about the book that I literally never shut up about so much that many of my friends have read it now. And that book is Infomocracy. So we'll definitely be talking about Infomocracy. We'll probably be talking about generative AI. We'll probably be talking about any other number of things that we can't stop thinking about because Matt and I have too many thinky thoughts in our brain. And hey, we'll see you after the holiday.
Yeah, talk to y'all then.
Bye.